Tonight marks halfway through the Night Owl season. And with two different winners and a championship leader in pro that has been the most consistent of them all, we march into the halfway point here at Silverstone in the UK. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to continuing coverage of the Night Owl Championship. I am Jesse Lee, joined by the lovely Josh Devonshire tonight with Ryan Mawson back behind the cameras as well. Josh, welcome back.
Yeah, as I think I say this every single time I'm back. It's been a good while, and I mean, hell, what a track to come back to, Silverstone. What to say about it? It's just it's going to be great, Jesse. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Sort of rescued us tonight, if I may be so bold. Absolutely, my hero for tonight. And well, this is Night Owl, of course, which means, well, one thing: anything is possible. Halfway through season 10, after we throw the checkered flag tonight, Ryan Yee has been the most consistent driver in the championship. They've got two second-place finishes, and that is good enough to give the Canadian the championship lead. They've been vested in both the races thus far. Could tonight be the night that Ryan Yee finally makes it to the finish line first? And can anyone else have anything to say about it? You know, Josh, we talk about this a lot. Consistency is key to victory. Ryan Yee showing them how it's done.
Yeah, I mean, it is more than possible to win a championship without taking a single win in each overall race. You know, so as long as, you know, the people around you are having worse races than you and you're able to kind of keep putting in those consistent results, yeah, you're more than able to fight for championships, even if you're not quite on the pace of everyone else around you. Obviously, sitting in 13th an hour, you know, Ryan Yee, we're watching him now, the number 7. You know, a lot of potential here tonight for that McLaren.
Well, we're in that transition period right before the qualifying session. And for those of you that may be new to Night Owl, what makes Night Owl different? Well, it's the one night a week that RCI TV kind of lets their hair down a little bit. We get a little bit more crass on the mic, and also the racing is a bit more shrewd sometimes as well. And also, it's the one night a week here that the drivers are thrown a curveball. There is random pit requirements every single week, and they only learn what those pit requirements are when the servers go live. So that would have been just about 40 to 50 minutes ago. We can tell you the pit requirements is 2 pit stops tonight, other than the just one, and also a liter of fuel required both times. That is going to do some interesting things to the strategy tonight.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, not knowing what you're kind of going into until you're getting into it, you know, it could affect all sorts of things. You don't know what the weather's going to be. You can't really plan around that. You know, different cars have different needs as well. Some will go further on the tank, some not. Some setups will manage tires better than others, and that can make a huge difference in terms of how you approach your race. And obviously, we like to kind of throw all the strategies into a hat and pick one out and and kind of just play with the drivers that way.
Well, tonight is going to be one of those, and I was talking to the stewarding team just very briefly, and it's remarkable. We've made it halfway into the season, and we still have a ton of cars. There's 29 the last I checked. It wouldn't surprise me if it's 30 plus at this point, and that's excellent retention. Keep in mind, this is not the only split we run for Night Owl. This is only Pro and High Silver. There's a second split that is Low Silver and AM going on as well. So that is a lot of cars. Everyone's staying up late on a Saturday, getting some racing in, and why not? I think I have an idea why we've had so much retention, simply because the racing's been all over the place so far. We've only had 2 races, of course, but they've been 2 completely different races. And I think if you've had a bad race, it sort of balanced itself out. And again, if you look at the championship points like we will after the conclusion of qualifying today, I think you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, you know what they say, never give up. And yeah, obviously, you know, as you said, we're 2 races in, and the more drivers, you know, we kind of have sticking with us. You know, that never give up mentality definitely comes in. We were talking before about consistency. we talked about before about consistency and winning and the ability to win championships without necessarily taking a win. Yeah, there's all the more reason to stay around because anything is possible here at RCI. We've seen this so many times before in different championships that anything is possible.
It's absolutely true, though. You can pretty much run these races any way you want and get the same result as long as you have consistency. We've had teams and drivers win it halfway through the season. We've had it come down to a dead heat at the end of the season. Our very own broadcaster, Ryan Mawson, won a championship with some very nice racing in the final week of Night Owl Season 9. So much to that point that it confused us in the box. We had to double and triple check the championship points to confirm that Ryan Mawson had won the silver championship by an point. Anything's possible.
Yeah, a single point. That is so tight. It's almost as tight as that apex there going into Brooklands. But this is what we love to see. We absolutely love coming, getting these cars on the grid, seeing them kind of go at it, and just being able to bear witness to it, and bring it to you guys. It's like it's just the best thing for us, honestly.
Well, Filippo Bokita has taken the quickest lap thus far out of the handful of cars that have set a time. It's a very nice 56.765. That is a very nice benchmark indeed. Savalainen nearly 3/4 of a second off of that pace. And you got Vanko Dimitrov in the Lambo Tractor, one of the more humorously named teams. They're just about 9/10. And Ayrton Stefano, who I believe is making their second only start in the series or in RCI in general. The Argentine driver put on an absolute show around the mountain. Didn't quite get the result they were after, but that car has a lot of pace, and so does Ayrton behind the wheel. Their P4, Benjamin Heilman, who having a little bit of an identity crisis in the past week, didn't get the finish on the mountain at Night Owl that they were expecting, had a poor race as well this week. They've just about fixed all those woes as they're inside the top 10 at least. That's an excellent start for the German driver, Harry Conway. That can't be true. Is that really Harry Conway? Somebody's messing with me.
That does appear to be Harry Conway in 13th in the Porsche. Porsche seems very strong around here with a couple of quick times coming in, 6th with Helmet, and obviously a Porsche taking provisional pole as well. But yeah, that would appear to be Harry Conway, Jesse.
Folks, this is very strange. Harry Conway has not entered RCI competition in quite some time, but here they are, a mid-season sign-up, which is completely allowed these days here at RCI TV. You can sign up mid-season, do your sort of pre-qualifying, and get put into the split that best suits you, of course. That Audi there having all sorts of issues. Alex Rogers, let's ride on board, see exactly what happened to the 119. Nothing too crazy there, but probably just back on the gas a little bit too early.
Yeah, it just looks like the traction control just kicks in a little bit too late for him. He puts the power down, spins the rear wheels up, and the back end slowly starts coming out, and just a slight overcorrection there coming out of Luffield. But pulls to the side and seems to have reset back to pits. Looking at the standings on the top three as well, now we've got Ryan Yee in second place. We're still almost half a second off of the provisional pole time of Bokita, though. It goes to show just how fast that 156.7 actually is.
Yeah, I was super surprised that Filippo was able to run that lap that early into the session. Normally, you see a little bit of a build-up. The track and the tires have to come up to temp, and Samir Foch has had a issue with the chicane there. That has not gone well. You can't get over the curb. You want to get as close to the big orange curb as possible, but going over it will do exactly what it did to Samir there.
Yeah. Yes, it looks like Matt is up on his time as well in the 414 Audi coming up into Luffield. So basically the final turn of the track, unless you count the small kink on the start-finish line. And Are we going to see an improvement here? We'll have to see it when we cross the line, which will be any minute now, and then that will be an improvement up to 21st. So that, I believe, is 4th in the silver class for the Audi 414.
Do keep in mind, both these classes are racing for their own championship here. Pro racing against pro, high silver racing against high silver. So that absolutely matters there. Harry Conway back in an RCI race. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I ever thought I would see that, let alone in the Porky. Now that is an interesting choice as well. And I talked to Harry Conway a couple times this week, did not mention that they were doing Night Owl. Very nice. I see you, Harry. I see you. John Razor, by the way, second in that class in the 699. Phil Malter doing well to keep pace, but will need several tenths to catch up to the top two in the high silver class as well. Rafael Huell in an unfamiliar spot to himself and us. Not sure why the black and white 721 Aston is so far down. Maybe not able to get that really quick lap in. This is well out of order for him, but he might be picking up to the tune of several seconds here, and will do all the way up to P21. That was a 58.7 dead. Still not quite where I would have expected them to come through, but I think that's perfectly fine. You definitely, it takes the pressure off, doesn't it, Josh? If you go from 30th to that close to your rivals in front, it's kind of a, okay, whew, the car isn't broken, I'm not broken, we can do this now.
Yeah, it's that kind of step up. It's that moment of realization of, as you say, that the ability to do those times is there. And as we're saying that, again, Benjamin Howman, up on his time, went up by, I believe it was 0.2 of a second, jumping back into 6th place. Savalainen in 3rd, about 6/10 off. Madison in 25th position. Going on board with them now for the Frog Stomp Racing Honda. It took me a little bit to say that one. Coming out of Luffield again, barreling down to the start-finish line. Are we going to see an improvement in the time and position? Currently 2.4 seconds behind the leader. That is an improvement up to 23rd position overall. Only 1.9 behind the leader now.
Well, you had trouble saying it. I had trouble at the start of the season. I didn't know if I could say that on YouTube or not. Frog Stomp Racing, but be kind. PSA: be kind to frogs. Don't tread on them.
Frogs are friend.
Either way, frogs are friend. I mean they eat insects, and they make, in my opinion, a quite lovely noise. But I digress. Back to the point, we saw one of the cars improve on their lap. I've just lost them on the board, but never mind. Jordan Watson in the 147, the LFT car. That BMW is on a flyer. This should be a pickup. And how? A 57.632. And that's going to take Jordan Watson all the way inside the top 5. Still 8.5 tenths off of Felipe Bokita. And the next nearest, Ryan Yee, the Canadian driver, the championship leader, is still half a second off of that time. That is a stonking lap Bokita's put down.
Yeah, it's crazy. Also, speaking of crazy, Ayrton Stefano currently half a second up on their time coming out of Luffield. Once again, we see this run from Luffield down to the start-finish line. Is there going to be an improvement? According to my timesheet, that is going to be the case. And that will bring, it's just to be them into 4th. So with only 3 minutes, 20 seconds left of qualifying, that would be a welcome bump in position, as we see them peel off at the exit of Copse Corner there to no doubt reset back to pits.
Well, Ayrton Stefano did not get a good result at the mountain 1 week ago, but that is not indicative of where that car was running. That car was a threat to the top 5, and they're doing it again tonight. They've absolutely come out of nowhere, and they've put a lot of drivers on notice, continuing that here in qualifying. Max Payne in a uncharacteristic 17th place, the 966 Lamborghini, looking to pick up quite heavily here. Gets one spot at least, a 58.215. Max Payne is one of the RCI's success stories. They've kind of come through the ranks a little bit, has Max Payne. most notably known as a silver driver, up into the pro class and showing them what they can do, keeping in front of the silver field. I would say that's a good move, Max Payne, in the pro class. Jordan Watson coming around again, picked up 10 spots last time by. LFT BMW looking to do a little bit more damage. Could it be a top 5 run? It is. It's going to be
Yes.
more than that. 57.302, half a second off Bokita, but third on the grid. That is excellent. Puts him into the second row.
So yeah, third place, second row of the grid at Silverstone. Apparently, from what we've been told from the broadcasting team, lost 0.2 of a second in the final corner. But even still, Silverstone does actually have overtaking opportunities. There's one or two, really glaringly obvious ones that you can go for, and if you're confident, there are spaces you can just squeeze on by. And the third place around here is a very, very good place to be starting.
Everybody chasing Felipe Bokita in the Porsche out front. Are you surprised to see a Porsche out front here with a field that has so many McLarens, BMWs, and AMGs in it? I will admit to being slightly surprised that the Porsche is the one out front.
I think at Silverstone, that might be the case. To me, Silverstone's always been a power track, and notoriously, Porsche's never been much of a power car. But it just goes to show that whatever Bakita's done to the setup on that and the way they're driving it, it's working in the twisty stuff. And maybe the faster exit speed is just kind of offsetting the lack of acceleration a little bit. But whatever, obviously, from sat in the comments box here, I can't tell you exactly how they're doing what they're doing. It's like, that's why these guys are driving and not me. But yeah, I am slightly surprised. Going back to the question, Jesse, I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I am slightly surprised that it is a Porsche out up in front at Silverstone.
Well, Savalainen has gone P2, still just about half a second off of that. Jordan Watson has been climbing up the grid every single lap. This won't be any different. A 57.135, good enough for P2 for the 147, and that's all she wrote. Would have had another lap had they elected to, but might have not had the fuel. They've pulled off. That'll be the end of their qualifying. Timothy Flamker goes P11, a 57.760. Will take 11th place for the moment. Wouter Billen in the 183 Aston Martin will be coming to the line shortly. A straight, a couple of corners left to go. They seem to be up on their lap. Keep an eye, though, on Savalainen and Yee. They're fighting on more than just a racetrack. They're fighting for the championship as well. Martin Lawrence, I don't see him in the race this evening, and I don't think we should expect him tonight unless, oh no, Martin Lawrence is there in 13th place. Never mind me. I am just blind. Wouter Billen coming to the line and coming through the kink, taking it very aggressively there, and is going to short shoot the straight, and that will be where they start for Billen, P13. Here is the not here Martin Lawrence, the CLR driver, who just finished up qualifying for the World Tour a little bit ago. Had a fantastic run in that, made it into the Super Pole, and did well beyond that as well. This car is one of the couple that we'll show you after qualifying, running for the championship, and should see some urgency here to get that car somewhere vaguely near the top 5, because that's where the drivers that he's racing are.
Yeah, that's where he'll want to be, and that's where he usually seems to be every time I've seen him on a racetrack. Currently up on his time by 0.15 of a second. There we go, up into the top 10, but still provisionally, there are still cars yet to finish laps. Speaking of cars finishing laps, here's Benjamin Heilman. And will we see an improvement in time? Looks like sticking in P6, so that seems like it rounds off qualifying just about.
Sure does. Martin Lawrence got the improvement they were looking for, put it in the top 10 where you would expect. Heilman inside the top 10 as well, just outside the top 5, all coming back together for those drivers. Time to look at the championship points after 2 rounds of the championship as we approach the halfway point in the season. Ryan Yee in the number 7 McLaren, 58 points. Martin Lawrence with 41 in second. Juna Savalainen with 39, tied with Samir Foch for that honor for P3. Ryan Yee has two second place finishes this season out of the two races. And well, it's been that kind of season, feast or famine for the race winners. Behind them, Christoph Stachecki, 25 points, tied with Felipe Bokita, who will take the pole today and break that tie. So you could argue Felipe Bokita is sole heir to fifth place. Behind them, Alex Rogers tied with Jordan Watson for 24 points apiece. Benjamin Heilman in ninth place with 22. Sean Madison, the Australian, rounds out your top 10 with 21. Back half of the pro field, Vanko Dimitrov, 18 points. Ryan Renoir with 16. Alessio Mellis tied with Wouter Billen with 9 points apiece. Hutchinson with 8 points. Javier Marquez on 7 points. Timothy Flamger, 5. Jordan Daly with 4. Aorton Stefano, 2 points. Miguel Martins on 2 as well. Back half of the pro field, the 0 means that they haven't scored points. The dash means that they have retired from the championship. Moving on to the silver class, Rafael Huell holds a very slim lead in the championship over John Arazer with 58 points to their name. Matt Artem, the American driver, in third place with 43 points. Jeff Seitman with 39. Rudy Philmalter, the South African, rounds out your top 5 with 37.5 points. Ethan Scott with 25, Neil Pimlott on 15, Stefanos with 13 points. Harry Conway has just joined the championship, and as I said earlier, anyone with a dash instead of a point total has retired from the championship. There are fewer silver drivers, by the way, Josh, simply because the silver class was split up into high and low silver for parity's sake. So it's one of those rare situations where we have fewer silver drivers than we do pro drivers.
Should mean at that point then that both classes should have a little bit more breathing space, which is often quite nice to see. It's nice to see cars just able to fight with their own class a bit more. It kind of provides a bit more racing for us guys, as well as it's nice for the drivers as well to be kind of competing with people on their sort of skill level.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that because you saw the points too, and I'm going to admit it. I'll freely and openly admit it. When I knew that they were splitting up the silver class, I thought, is that a good move? Because you're only going to have, on a good day, 8 or 9 silver drivers in the top split, and have 8 or 9 in the second split. And they're going to be vastly outnumbered by AMs, and then the pros are going to vastly outnumber them in this split. I had my doubts, if I'm completely honest. I think though the admin team did the right thing because of exactly what you just said. It has made that so very close. The top 4 or 5 positions, they're separated by what, 19, 20 points or something like that. And that's very doable, of course. Do keep in mind a perfect weekend nets you something to the effect of 39 or 40 points. So they're within a race still as we approach the halfway point. It seems to have worked, is my what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, and the cars ahead of you, or if you're the car behind you, there's cars ahead of you. Anything could happen over the course of one race. People can lose connection. It's unfortunate, but people don't seem to realize is that sim racing can be a lot like real racing at the same time in terms of failures do happen. We've seen wheel failures, we've seen pedal failures, we've seen connections drop. Much like teams struggle with it on real life weekends. So yeah, if you get a lucky weekend, or even if you just slowly start chewing into that gap by having a good weekend yourself or a good race, then yeah, the gaps are totally able to be closed in on, and I think that's what this new format really allows for.
It certainly does. And in the pro class, we've talked a lot about Ryan Yee just being consistent. They haven't been the quickest or the first to the post in either of the weekends we've had thus far. But what Yee has had is consistency, and they've been consistently quick. They've lived on the podium, and they've also done some really awesome hardcore racing as well. I lost my voice a week ago, basically calling Ryan Yee and the like to the line. Ryan Yee was not running in second place whenever they took the last lap of that race. They had to sort of persevere, keep the car on the road, and even dodge some cars to get to the line. I know Felipe Bokita would like us to forget that that happened. We can't forget that that happened, I'm afraid. But Felipe has had their own little resurgence here. They've righted the ship by taking pole position, and they've done so in grand fashion. Josh, can anybody catch Felipe Bokita tonight?
I mean, that gap in qualifying was huge. I don't think there's a I don't think there's another word to really describe it. But again, race pace and qualifying pace can be two very completely different things. The Porsche, we do know that its particular weakness, the fuel tank being at the front. If you're on a qualifying run and you've got no fuel, then your balance for the race is going to be affected. You can counteract that by running a different setup for sure. But how is that going to affect race pace, especially when the fuel starts to run low, or the tires become suboptimal? There's so many factors that go into the play because of the weirdness of that Porsche. That I think people might have a chance. Despite the pace difference in qualifying, I do think there might be a chance of catching Bokita today during the race.
Well, it's a very good point. You have to maintain your consistency and also your pace, and you never can tell, just like you said, what's going to happen in the race. Flash you back 1 week ago, the last 2 laps, Samir Foch and Felipe Bokita both running in the podium spots, second and third. Both had issues. That allowed fourth place Ryan Yee to come by both of them and take second place. You just cannot write this stuff. It is incredible what happens in these races, and tonight they're going to be put through their paces. 1 hour of racing, 60 minutes, but in that time they are required to come down pit lane twice. Welcome to Night Owl, where the rules are made up the day of the race, so to speak, and tonight is no different. We usually have one race with multiple pit stops. Tonight is that night. They do not have to take tires, but to satisfy the mandatory pit requirement, they must come down, stop in their box, and take at minimum 1 liter of fuel. I got to know, Josh, what would you do in this case? Are you trying to short fill the car to the end of the race? Surely most of these drivers have to be on a almost full fuel load.
Yeah, I think that'd be my mentality approaching this. I'd be trying to keep the car going for each stint for as long as it possibly can, and maybe have a short dash towards the end. Just try to get the overcut. But again, strategies could also change depending on where you are on the field, Jesse. I've found, if you're the car behind and maybe you're having a bit of a bad race, you maybe try to get the maybe try to get the undercut, or just to try and kind of jump the cars ahead of you, especially if you're stuck behind traffic. But there's a lot of factors that go into it.
I'm just happy to see that the undercut has been working on occasion. There was a long period here where the undercut just did not seem to be working for anybody, and all of a sudden it has started to work again. I think it's very strategy dependent as well, based on how much fuel you have and how long you go. Obviously, pitting way too early still to me seems not beneficial to most people. You'd only have to go back one night ago to see Verstappen have issues with it. Pitted very, very early in the race, and yes, gained a lot of positions, was nearly inside the top 5, but because they pitted so early, they gave up all of that track position back whenever their tires were worn out at the end of the race. So I don't think that's beneficial. I think you can make an argument for pitting a little bit earlier than some of the other teams, exactly like you said, Josh, if and when your track position requires it, especially if you're in a group.
There's no time in wasting time behind slower cars, but I think, Jesse, we are about to start the race tonight, so it's exciting to be back.
It's absolutely lovely to have you. Whenever I saw your name on the schedule, well, let's just say I had a big grin on my face. Folks, Night Owl Season 10, race number 3, live from Silverstone. The track could not be more perfect. The weather is cooperating, and we have 30-plus cars at the mid-season ready to do battle for 1 hour. What will the pit strategy be? We'll find out how it unfolds over the next 60 minutes. But for right now, all eyes on Felipe Bokita as they try to outduel everyone on the GT pit straight in the cops. for the very first time, waiting an awful long time past the line, and the green flag and the lights are on, and it's a decent enough start getting down to the inside. The Porsche is able to cover off the BMW as nearly everybody inside the top 5 gets single file. That was a orderly start by any definition of the word up front. I can't say I have seen as little protest from a start of a race in some time. One car off in Maggots, and they get back on, and Beckett's too wide, further off in the back as they get into Chapel. And other than the one or two incidents, I think everyone got away with it. Matt Artem started from the pit lane, unknown if that is strategic or not. I did see the 414 in the lane, and they have entered the fray, albeit about half a straightaway behind the rest.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There are advantages to starting at the pit lane. You kind of avoid any kind of potential first lap melee. But as you were saying, Jesse, that was surprisingly clean. Oh, I'll say surprisingly clean, but given that some of the races that we've seen in the past, it's always good seeing a race start as clean as that. Benjamin Howman dropping down to 17th. I was not talking about being clean. Benjamin Howman started in 6th, so dropping down to 17, I'm wondering what happened to
Josh, I think that's the car I saw go off in Maggots, I'm pretty sure. It was a white car. I had no idea it was Heilmann's car, but I think that's exactly what I saw.
It might just be. I mean, first lap scraps, you kind of get pushed wide a bit. It might not have been a full takeout, but, obviously the Porsche as well, very, very, what's the word? Unsettled, I think, is a polite way of putting it. But no, it's unfortunate to see Stewie step down so many places, but it could be one of those recovery drives. It's still an hour to go, still a long way, a lot of strategy at play, there's everything to play for.
Well, I will say we are in constant communication with the stewarding department, and our thanks and welcome in to the live stewards who keep the racing nice and fair, but they might not have anything to keep fair on that opening lap, simply because they're all standing around with their mouths open, and that could only mean one thing, Josh. I think it might have been a clean lap 1 on the scoreboard.
I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've seen that for a very, very long time. It's always, as I say, it's always great to see, because good racing is good racing, and that's why we're all here. And I want to give everyone credit for that.
I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I went down to the steward's box earlier before we went live tonight, and I said, folks, there's 30 plus cars here in Night Out at Silverstone, and I didn't say what I wanted to say, but it was mutually agreed that we all knew what that meant. But as it turns out, we don't know what that meant, simply because, as far as we're concerned, that was a clean first lap. And even if it wasn't, it was the cleanest first lap here at Silverstone I have ever seen. Very close. That wasn't clean, though. Samir Foch making contact, and making contact again. Is that Ryan Yee in the 7? Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, it is Ryan Yee. And that is going to hamper his championship hopes. The driver that's finished second in both races so far gets turned by Foch. Unknown if Yee was held up in front, or maybe was just a little bit slower than Foch assumed he was going to be. A tough section of the racetrack, of course, the slowest and tightest section, certainly. Let's take another look here. Tell me what you see.
It looked maybe a little bit opportunistic from that one. And obviously, it backs up. It's Marcus Lawrence is sort of getting a little bit of a bonk there as well. As the incident sort of backs up. A good opportunity to take the first pit stop, but really unfortunate circumstances leading for that. Should see some interesting strategy options come alive because of it, but it did look like the Lexus just tried to take a little bit of an opportunistic move, and it's hard to say. It's one of those parts of the racetrack, it's so wide, there's so many different lines through it. From our perspective, we can speculate all day long, but I suppose the stewards will have more angles than we do. They'll be looking through it, and we should hear back very shortly about the outcome of that incident.
Speaking of the stewards, they have confirmed a couple of things. That one, that my eyesight, though it is a bit more poor than it was in my younger day, I did in fact see Benjamin Heilman having a moment going through maggots the very first lap. That was the car I saw off into the runoff zone, and that is why that car is off. There was no contact, though. That was simply handling characteristic of that car at the time. Other than that, confirmed by the stewarding team that that was a clean lap number one. Everybody, for those of you with the benefit of flash photography, take a picture of that. You do not ever see that. This is a 30-plus car field, and they all made it around to at least lap 2 before the carnage started. I can't say I've seen that in quite some time. And it wasn't orderly either. They were 2 and 3 wide back in the pack.
Yeah, there were some cars really going for it. You know, it wasn't as you say. It's not as if cars were being being careful is one thing. It's not as if the cars weren't being a little bit aggressive. You know, getting a little bit of elbows out. It's always a good thing to see. Speaking of elbows out, there's Renoir looking for 17th place. 2 Audis on each other, looking to take Ethan Scott. Obviously, Ethan Scott is in the silver class, and Renoir being in pro. So, you know, not too much at stake in terms of points for this position for either driver, but that will push Scott 1 place away from a razor if Renoir can find a way through. Coming down into Mackett and Beck, it's not usually an overtaking opportunity. Oh, and that's the 34 slamming on the brakes. 732 taking some evasive action there to avoid going into the back. I've lost a little bit of time to. And that's something that Renoir maybe needs to take into account, that around cars that, you know, are maybe in the class below, that maybe, you know, they might not be as confident in the car. You know, they won't carry as much speed through, and Renoir might not be able to put the amount of trust into Scott that he could put into another pro driver, just in terms of the differences of pace.
Well, let's get you all caught up on some of the things we have not mentioned. There's about 10 to 12 cars that have already completed their first pit stop. They have to do 2 of them tonight. 1 liter of fuel required, no tire change required. And I wonder if somebody might try that strategy on one of their pit stops tonight. Certainly, if they were going to do that, you would expect them to do it on the second pit stop, not the first, to get the best effect. But well, there's a reason I'm in this box, folks, and I'm not a strategist for one of the teams. We'll have to see how that plays out. But up to P19, there are the cars that have pitted. Timothy Flamker leads the cars that have done so thus far. Heilman Nellis was the most recent car to come in. And also our number 1 qualifier in high silver, Harry Conway. They pitted very early, and that looked like a intuitive decision by the driver of the 428 to come in when they did. They gave up the lead in the high silver class to John Arazer, who is 1.6 seconds in front of Ethan Scott. Alex Rogers is going to come into the pit lane, who continues to have one of the funnier car names, albeit a bit unfortunate. I qualified in the wrong car. Did Rogers, didn't want to be in the Audi, ended up in the Audi because that was the car they did the quickest lap times in. And per the rules, whatever you qualify the highest in, if you change cars in qualifying, well, that's the car that you are stuck with. But look at this. Jade Hutchinson in the 726, threatening down the hanger straight. It's going to have to hang a left here and go around the outside. Stowe is one of those corners you can't get this done. But look at Martin Lawrence, the opportunistic driver, looking down the inside, still unabated as Hutchinson looking onto the inside of Dimitrov. And they're going to be side by side here for 7th place, or 6th place in this case. Hutchinson and Lawrence, a little bit of contact.
I mean, that could go either way. Maybe that's a little bit opportunistic from Lawrence there, but from Lawrence at the time there. But at the same time, the Lexus didn't leave an awful lot of space given the situation from the angle we just saw that at. But that was obviously the BMW moving up a position, but but very, very close racing nonetheless. And the Lexus is, you know, still hanging on in there, still behind.
Well, the penalty reports have come through for the early incidents. Racing incident between the 732 and the 34. Racing incident between the 70 and the 171. Racing incident between the 62 and the 9. And the only penalty thus far is a 15-second penalty for the 888. I'm pretty sure that's Samir Foch for taking out the number 7 of Ryan Yee. The position was returned, so that saved Foch a drive-through, reduced to a 15-second penalty. Martin Lawrence into the pit lane.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a little bit of contact there. We know Lawrence had a little bit of contact earlier on as well. Uh, maybe an idea just to get the damage, repaired out of the way, so you don't lose too much time. It seems like a smart move. A lot of drivers have already taken that stop as well. And it makes sense. You take the car out. You sort of see how the pace is like, see what the pace of the cars around you is like. Put like a medium load of fuel in the car and just make a decision on the fly as it goes to suit the situation as you see it best. Benjamin Hellman coming out of Luffield, making up some positions, obviously taking the stop, taking a bit more of a hit in terms of position, looking to be in 19th place as we come out of Cops Con. That's when the Audis in front having a little bit of a moment. That would have been Rogers, who we saw pit just a few laps ago. Just getting a little bit loose there into T1.
I'm just going to say, the last time we were here, I noticed this handling characteristic on some of the Audis. They did exactly this. Watch this. Completely sideways into cops. And we saw that with several different makes the last time we were here.
It almost feels like what seems to be happening is that it almost looks like the aero at the back of the car just seems to stall for just a moment, because it's the rear that seems to lose grip. The front seems to be, with the counter steer, the front seems to pin itself in place. So obviously, I'm not a driver for the most part, but that's from the outside perspective. That's what it seems like what's happening.
Well, Ryan Yee had that big accident, and it's put them in a hole. Keep in mind, Yee qualified way in front of Harry Conway, who was the high silver leader, and they're well behind, several seconds in fact, as they work on Raphael Huell. They have to get through them and continue the march back to the front. It's going to be a long old way, as Ryan Mawson would say, back to the front tonight for Ryan Yee. But if anybody can do it, it will be the championship leader, because they've done that. They've made a habit out of it so far this season. Martin Lawrence is still leading of the cars that have made their pit stop, and that's important to note, because Conway, who was trying to make up some spots themselves, all these drivers that have pitted early, they've not got clean air, Josh, have they? They're in traffic. So many of them pitted. If you look at the track map on the right, you've got the lead group of cars. Javier Marquez is in that lead group of cars with the team name I can't say on this channel, but I totally agree with the team name. You got the lead group, and then you've got the group on the other side of the racetrack that have all pitted now.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's a difficult situation to find yourself in and having to fight your way through. And I think some of these cars pitted due to incidents we'd seen earlier on in the race. Rogers, again, as I speak, has just made the pit stop, second pit stop of the race, to basically wipe their mandatory pit stops as is. So they don't need to stop now at this point in time for the rest of this race. But yeah, it's a huge fight to try and get through the pack. I mean, overtaking opportunities at Silverstone, it's a very fast track, and a lot of the cars, Maggots and Beckett's Chapel, there's only one line through them, through Abbey, through Stir, through Copse. There's only really one line through those corners, and they're so high speed that making a move there can be risky. It's not impossible, but realistically, there's only a few corners you can really squeeze on by. I mean, the opportunities are definitely there, but you've got to be careful. But if you're stuck behind cars that are on a much different pace to you, and they're taking slightly strange lines compared to what you might be used to, that can make a driver second guess how to get by.
It sure can. That was a nice pass Ryan Renoir put on John Racer there, and I wonder if Racer made that a little bit more easy, knowing that, look, Racer's trying to win this race in high silver, and Renoir is not a threat to them. And I won't say that was quite orchestrated, but there wasn't a fight there, and I think rightly so on John. We look to the penalty report. You'll notice that the 183 has 5 seconds, and that's because they turned in on the 49 and gained a lasting advantage off of the racetrack. 5-second penalty awarded to the 183.
Yeah, as you said, it's a few incidents so far. You know, we've seen a little bit cars pitting because of them, and you know, you never like seeing penalties being handed out. But you know, that could also be a little bit of solace for some of the cars stuck at the back. Seeing Yates Hutchinson in the 726 in the Lexus chasing down Dimitrov. I think we saw them a few laps ago. You know, still glued to the back of the gearbox of that Huracan. And still not quite able to find a way through, but seems to have the pace on them. Looking at the timesheets, last lap for Hutchinson was a 158.9 to the Lamborghini's 159.4 to 159.9. So yeah, there is a bit of a gap there. Apologies, I'm stumbling off my words a little bit.
Listen, it's completely fine. I think you've caught whatever disease I have. Jade Hutchinson into the pit lane. They will do one of their 2 required pit stops. Filippo Bokita enjoys a 6.3 second lead on Watson. Ayrton Stefano is in 3rd place for the time being. That's your top 3. Savalainen and Dimitrov make up the rest of your top 5. And behind them, cars pitting and trying to work the strategy. Christoph Stachecki further back into P10. The 144 McLaren also in my opinion, and keep in mind, my opinion's not worth a whole lot in this strategic case. I think this is the right idea. I think pitting in that early group was a little bit of a mistake for some of these cars, but we have seen several cars come in to complete their 2nd stop. Samir Foch has done so, and they still carry that penalty. Let's see what happened here to the 888. A little bit too much curb. Nope, that's completely fine. Just an overtake for Samir Foch happened before that. As you'll notice, the 119 is behind the 888 for the time being, and that will be and should be a position change, because the 119 of Alex Rogers has completed their mandatory pit stops tonight. Sean Madison and Benjamin Heilman are the rest of the drivers that have already done their mandatory stops. Interesting strategy, pitting 10 minutes apart early into this race. Can that work? I don't know.
I mean, you set the car so far behind everyone else, you've got the clean air, and hopefully when you catch up to the guys up ahead, you can make up enough time in that clean air whilst everyone's fighting. Hope that you get by them in the pits and kind of continue a lot of that clean air, or at least bring yourself out into the thick of into a bit of a battle, really. So maybe playing the long game here isn't a terrible option, especially if you've had kind of first lap woes or early race woes. You know, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see how it pans out, and it could be a masterstroke of genius. It could be a disaster. Only time will tell.
Spoken like Toto Wolff there. If it works out, I'm a genius. If it's not, I've got a very long press conference after the race where I have to explain myself and look at shoes. I think it is interesting to see. It could go either way at this point. I like this old saying, as long as the race is still going, nobody's right or wrong. You're only right or wrong when the race is over, and I think we're still 41 and a half minutes away from getting a verdict here. It is worth mentioning, it is quite a warm day here at Silverstone. 31 degrees C on the track, 24 ambient, and this is what the British would call unsufferably warm, I'm pretty sure. It is quite hot, no clouds in the sky whatsoever. A very warm day for racing. It'll be torturing the tires, it'll be torturing the drivers as well, as they have to keep up with the racetrack throughout the entire race here today. Alessio Mellis trying to get a spot back on Will Stevenson in the 123 CLR car, the Porsche Spinella team, working over Will Stevenson as we ride on board the wing, looking back at Harry Conway, and an unenviable position for Alessio Mellis, if you ask me, trying to take a spot but knows if they make the move and it doesn't come off, Harry Conway is going to be by them, and Conway needs to. Conway cannot afford to be held up by Mellis or Will Stevenson here, simply for the fact that Conway is trying to contest the silver win today, and this is a worst case scenario, being caught up into traffic, losing time to a razor.
Yeah, you don't want to be you don't want to be stuck behind for as long as you have to, especially when you've already made that stop. You know, all the cars up ahead are trying to catch up to the rest of the group, and no, being held up is kind of the worst thing possible for this group of drivers right now. Looking at things, Javier Marquez in the 49 McLaren is making their first stop now, so you know, we're not quite halfway into the race. We're about, I don't know what, we're about a quarter of the way through, just over. So maybe, you know, that might starting to come into the pit windows that we can maybe expect. Sort of Rita looking on the inside of Maggott and Beck, it's not quite. But getting the run out into Chapel might be the strat. If, you know, tuck in on the inside, get the power down nice and early, tuck into the slipstream. And we've seen it before. We have seen moves going into Stowe from the exit of Chapel there. But I don't think a Razor is going to be quite close enough to make that happen.
Well, it's gone poorly for the Canadian driver of Jeff Siteman. They've been given a drive-through penalty, but that's not going to show up on the penalty report simply because that's for track limits. Only 20 minutes into the race, the number 9 Honda has run afoul of the track limits, and ACC has assigned them a drive-through penalty. That's a tough pill to swallow early in this one.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of penalty is not usually ideal. It's never ideal, really. But yeah, I mean, there's still time to pull it back. You know, they've already made one pit stop. Obviously, this is going to require another trip to the pits on top of this because they can't serve that pit stop while taking the penalty. But I mean, we'll just have to see what they can make of the situation.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeff's going to have to make 3 trips down pit lane tonight, and well, normally that would be an even bigger issue, but of course you're required to come down twice. You don't want to be coming down any more times. Look at how aggressive Harry Conway is being on the back of Alessio Mellis, working the angles in that Porsche, trying to find any sort of weakness or avenue that they can maneuver that car in and by the Spinalla team car, simply because Conway knows what we know, cannot be losing time, and that's what's happening here. Harry Conway driving for Baddest Motors here in this race. Very interesting, the Baddest Motorsports. That's a play on his, we'll call it his online nickname for those of you that are uninitiated, but either way, Conway losing time here and might be seeing the win slip out of his grasp. We'll see. Razor hasn't taken their first stop. Neither has Ethan Scott. Neither has the 88 either. The top 3. Virtually everybody else has done so. At least everybody in the silver class has at least done one of the stops. Conway looking around the outside there, just looking for room, anything. Get the nose in, get them side by side, slow them down, drag them back to you, and then set them up. Even if you can't make the pass from that position, slow them down, set them up, get by them. Conway, a little bit desperate right here, but of course, like I said, needs to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, Conway isn't just going to slouch around. I mean, pushing the car quite hard, you know, picking that exit point to get onto the throttle, like going through Stoke, running a little bit wide, but maybe using that to some kind of advantage. I mean, it's something I've seen a little bit of some of these drivers. You can take a few liberties with the track limits. Maybe if it's worth it, picking up a warning point to try and get the exit to get into the braking zone. I mean, Stowe's a great corner to do it because it's got such a wide exit that maybe if you're confident in using one of those warnings, using them almost strategically, as we see a Ferrari off going into, I believe that
was Mellis. Was this contact, or was this an issue with Alessio Mellis getting too close to the back of Will Stevenson?
Looks like the Audi moves to the side, and looks like it cuts across over, squeezes the Ferrari to the outside of the track, and just denies the Ferrari the apex. So that was just a bit of a
that's what Harry Conway wanted, at least.
Yeah, he'll be over the moon with that. I mean, obviously he's made up that position now, and I do firmly believe that once Conway gets by, he's just going to sail away from these guys. He's going to be keeping up with them and more. But yeah, that was interesting. It's almost as if the Ferrari just got denied the apex to the turn, and the Audi just kind of delayed their turn in to kind of compromise a little bit. I mean, it might be a bit touch and go depending on how how other people see it, but that's a potential masterstroke at defending, and that's Conway through off the McLaren as well. McLaren seems to have gone wide going through Copse Corner. We will see a replay of that. And you see exactly what just happened going into Copse. Conway's actually quite far back at this point. McLaren uses all of the it's what we were talking about before. Just losing the back end through Copse Corner. As you said to yourself, Jesse, we've been seeing that a little bit throughout this race, and the last time we were here. And it just seems like it's just cost William Stevenson that position.
Well, I was going to accuse Will Stevenson of letting Harry Conway through right there. These two know each other, and I was going to accuse Will of allowing that to happen, denoting that Conway has a little bit more pace on them right now. But no, that was all the Will Stevenson CLR car stepping out on him right there. And, well, happy birthday to Harry Conway. Gets both those spots now, has clean air, and will be looking to make up time. Keep in mind, Conway's done one of the mandatory stops. The top three in silver have not done a single stop yet. And the most important thing for Conway, they've been stuck in traffic and they have to continue to make lap time. Otherwise, whenever the cars in front of them pit, they will come out in front because they've not been held up. They've been in clean air. Razor and Ethan Scott particularly have been racing kind of on their own, sort of by themselves. The only other thing coming through for the stewards is a racing incident between the 171 and the 726. Seemingly just had the minor contact there, so nothing doing there. And as far as I'm aware, the stewards aren't too busy right now. They don't have an incident to look at, and they'll be thankful for that. Like I said, a lot of cars, a lot of opportunities for incidents, but only about 5 of them on the board and only 2 actual penalties. We take those here at Night Owl.
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thought of all the championships would see this clean of a race? It would be Night Owl. But, you know, it's provided some absolutely amazing, I say this all the time, but it's provided us some absolutely amazing racing to watch and to kind of bring to you guys, and just to shout into a mic over, because it's what we it's what we love to see, you know, these cars getting up close on the limit, and it's fascinating to watch. There's so much at play. And you know, I've had a lot of friends recently, you know, who weren't into racing literally just a few weeks ago, and they've kind of come into it now. They've seen me kind of introduce them to ACC and sim racing and Formula One in real life and a lot of the endurance things. And you know, it's one of those games that a lot of people, I don't think they love it, or know they love it, until they immerse themselves into it. And well, this is what we're all about here.
Well, first of all, thank you for being an ambassador for sim racing. I always say that sim racing is only as good as the people that represent it, and I would say you are a fine representative of the community. And I always tell people when they ask why sim racing above all else, well, if you're going to do something as a simulation, you have many options, but none of them get quite as close to the real thing as sim racing, as far as replicating the feeling, the emotion, and what you go through in the car. And I always appreciated sim racing for that. You just don't get that extra bit of realism from doing other simulations, in my humble opinion. Several cars have come in to complete all of their stops. I saw Jordan Daly in the lane, and Christoph Stachecki leads of the cars that have completed all of their stops. Samir Foch is 2.5 seconds behind them, but of course Foch has that 15-second penalty that they will get tacked on to the end of their race time. Foch will not be coming back down pit lane to serve that. They'll just take that as a time penalty at the end of the race, which you are allowed to do. Stefano Papavasilio in the 88, the SP Racing liveried and badged car, continuing to lead Timothy Flanger here. Stefanos is the third place car in the high silver class for the time being, albeit with 2 pit stops left to give. Martin Lawrence back inside the top 10 with one of the pit stops done on that car. We talked about the contact earlier, and that was deemed a racing incident. Ryan Yee, who got tangled up with Samir Foch in recovery mode, but at least trending in the right direction, has Renoir in front of them They've got by Javier Marquez, and now turn their sights on Ryan Renoir just inside the top 15. Here's Jordan Daly, who has Heilman behind them. Now, this is interesting. On a different day, these two might be teammates, but they're not teammates tonight.
No, not at all. And no love lost. His helmet just sends it up the inside of Maggots. So not too much of a battle to be seen there. But another thing to note, that's Hellman dropping down to it's 28th position now with that overtake. And last time we saw... Okay. Let's just slow down for just a moment. Hellman started in P6, had a first lap wobble, and then we saw them in P17. When we saw them after that, we saw them in P19, and now in the high 20s, as we see Stefanos in the 88 coming in to take a pit stop. It seems like our old Stewie has been trending downwards, but at the same time also has both their stops done and sorted for the race. 29 minutes of the race that's going, some people haven't even made one stop yet, which that'll make Harry Conway very happy. He's only 0.6 of a second off of the 88, who I'd imagine has gone through now, according to the time sheet that I'm seeing with you guys on the left-hand side of the screen. That looked like a bit of a... Okay, we'll see a replay of that.
What happened to Javier Marquez here? Was this just a little bit of a loose situation? Yeah, it sure was. He was in trouble before he even got into Maggots there.
Yeah, it's just a little bit high speed instability there. And, we have seen it a few times in this race already, but it's has seems to have cost a position that Stefano going through. But yes, no, I think the point I was trying to make, Jesse, in a long-winded, convoluted way, was Hellman is now free of stops. Do we think Hellman can pull back enough positions to kind of salvage this race a little bit?
Well, certainly he's hoping so, because the qualifying seemed to be quick enough. You pointed out very early, Josh, that sometimes qualifying not indicative of the actual pace. As we run on board Ryan Yee's car, getting a little bit of a lock there. Again, some of the foul handling characteristics showing up here at Silverstone. We've seen that in recent races here, and they've not all been this warm. It's not the heat causing that. It's something to do with the Pirelli rubber and the cars and the way that they're set up. We used to never see that to this degree, and now it is, I would say, fairly extreme. You have to have a good, sharp handle on the race car, and if you mess up even slightly, things like that certainly can occur. Well, we've been chronicling the issues today. What about issues on pit road? Jeff Seitman had that penalty that they had to serve, the drive-through for track limits. Earlier on in the process of doing that, they sped in the pit lane, got themselves a stop-and-go 30, and unfortunately, Stefanos Vasiliou has done the same thing, except they were serving one of their mandatory stops. Papa Vasiliou sped in the pit lane, and they have got a stop-and-go 30, and so does Will Stevenson for Connection Lost Racing. They were on a mandatory stop and also sped in the pit lane. Josh, what's happening?
I think maybe a little bit of clumsiness at worst, but I think at best maybe someone's just hit one of the pit marker boards, and at that point in time you have to kind of use your own judgment, and some of these guys are pushing it as late as they possibly can and maybe just slightly getting it wrong. We'd have to keep an eye out next time we see the entrance of pit road on the exit, and that was Samir Bosch in the 888 Lexus, making a bit of a move on the inside of the stow on our team in the 414 Audi. Very cleanly bike, really. Kind of textbook, not really a whole lot to say.
I like Samir's team name, the Vroom Esports car. Samir trying something a little bit different this season, Night Owl, with the Lexus. You'd be forgiven if you would expect him to be driving a prancing horse. And to see him in anything else is quite strange, but I think he's done it justice, in my opinion. Has Samir Foch. It might not be the desired result tonight, but Foch proving he's quick no matter what manufacturer he is in. Wouter Billen, of course, now inside the top 5, one of the handful of cars that have not pitted thus far. And keep in mind, you got to do 2 of those. And they have a 5-second penalty. the point I make, though, is Dillon will have to serve that. That'll be 5 seconds longer in the stop. That'll let Max Payne through. In that case, we saw Harry Conway into the lane for their final stop. I kind of like that. Hopefully they come out in clean air. Otherwise, it'll feel like Groundhog Day for him, I'm afraid. Javier Marquez showing no fear going through the section that bested him. Oh, and it's gone majorly wrong. It's gone majorly wrong for Javier Marquez. The second time asking, charges into the corner, this time a little bit later into Maggots here, and has had it go wrong again.
Seems like that car set up very, again, it's very McLaren trait, understeer into the grass, which causes snap oversteer. We saw it a few laps ago, the same car, same corner, and this time round, that car has just bitten and bitten hard. That's front end damage on the car. It might not be, it might look worse than it actually is. We'll have to keep an eye out, but the only person right now who knows how bad that car will be is Javier themselves. So we'll have to see if they retreat back to the pits at the end of this lap. But that is not the way you kind of want your race to go. On another note, a bit of a lighter note, Jesse, sorry to suddenly change the tone a bit. That theory of the pit marker board being hit, as we saw Harry Conway come in, the entrance marker is in fact lying on the ground in the pits, and that might just be what's throwing a few people off hitting the pit limits at the time they need to hit it.
Well, it's gone from bad to worse. Folks, there's no rain falling from the sky, but it is Britain, so when it rains, it pours. Harry Conway speeding in the pit lane on their final stop. A stop-and-go 30 is given to that car. Keep in mind, these are all ACC penalties, and Alex Rogers has made heavy contact with Matt Artem, nearly spun them around. Artem gets going, but that looked slightly avoidable for my eye. Alex Rogers just going for a move up the inside, ill-fated, and they all get away. Quite curious what the stewards will say about that. They won't like that, but what variety of penalty will they consider for that?
Yeah, Alex Rogers
don't know.
Does seem to have taken a bit of an advantage there, having made the position. Mellis in the Ferrari all over. It looks like Rogers actually lost the rear end there coming out of Luffield. We're about to see that again. So the 119 did make up a position with that contact. Yes, just losing the back end a little bit on corner exit. And I'd like to bring our attention to the YouTube chat just for a moment, Jesse, because the last thing that I'm seeing on here is Wolf Motorsport saying hopefully the final half will be just as clean. There's been some great battles going on. First of all, there has been some amazing battles happening. However, it's all coming apart in the final half of this race. So, have we been second-hand commentators cursed here?
Well, the chat has proven themselves very capable of cursing, as Alessio Mellis is just going to absolutely streak by their rival in that corner. That was an incredible sort of driving. Was that Miguel Martins that they were passing? I think it was, but just no fear into Stowe up the inside. I feel like almost that wasn't Miguel Martins, in fact, that he just passed, was it? That was Artem? That must have been Artem.
It looks like, yes, that's
two silver cars confusing.
I mean, you said it, not me, Jesse.
But no, Miguel Martins was passed, but now that is a pass on Miguel Martins as Alex Rogers goes streaking through. But yeah, Mellis making that pass on Artem. And continuing to come through. Miguel Martins not really contesting these positions. That tells me that Miguel is either A, on a completely different strategy, which of course he is. He still has a pit stop to give. But beyond that, maybe that car isn't driving up to the level that he's comfortable with right now, or maybe he's just seen a lot of the other Audis have issues. Keep in mind, the vast majority of slides today have been the Audi brand.
Yeah, but it might just be something with that rear end setup of the Audi, to try and maybe get the car to turn in. Maybe that's just a side effect of what we're seeing here, and it is kind of costing some of these guys a little bit of not time but consistency. And that's an interesting point to bring up. It's a case of having a car that's happy to lap here for a complete hour without having these unhealthy characteristics, as we see Raphael Hull coming on the outside of Stowe in the 721 Aston, Imagine fighting with Marquez. Marquez, we saw take that heavy damage earlier on in the race. It looks like the damage is still there. So I'm going to sort of stab in the dark and say that Marquez hasn't come to pits yet, especially considering that that other mandatory pit stop has not been marked. So still one stop to go. So is Marquez's pace being affected by the damage? We will have to see, but for the most part, you're still trying to find a way around that 49 McLaren. Bokita, interesting to note, by the way, Jesse, the 326 Porsche that was in the lead, and to answer the question that you asked me at the start of the race, being quite dominant and no one catching, has taken both stops and running in the top 10. So that might be a case of that car has confirmed the lead as soon as all the strategies kind of come together.
I just want to point out something real quick. I was trying to think in my mind when the last time we had an Australian winner for one of these races. I do apologize if it's if I'm mistaken. Actually, no. You know what? I take it back. It's been a little bit more recent than I thought. I've just thought of a couple of Australian drivers that have one. My apologies to Australia. But Felipe Bokita doing an excellent job already inside the top 10. All their pit stops have been completed, and certainly now just needs to not get tangled up with any of the cars in front of them while still making pace. We have had one casualty, Harry Conway, after getting that speeding in pit lane penalty. That car has retired, so the pole-sitting high silver car will not contest a top 3 here tonight, and that opens the race wide open for the likes of John Araser and Raphael Huell, of course, Ethan Scott, and the like of them, who will take victory in the high silver class tonight. I have to play it by ear. Watson leads the race, still has 2 pit stops left, and I'm quite curious what the strategy is here from the top 5. They're going to basically have to pit really quickly here near the end, I suspect, in quick succession. Is that the right call? We had a couple of cars do that at the beginning of the race. Alex Rogers lost it on the inside, a little bit wide there as well. That was very close stuff. Artem and some of the other cars, all in Audis, all having various different versions of distress there. One going incredibly wide, one nearly looping it on the infield of Stowe.
Yeah, as you say, it does seem to be Audis. I mean, the odd McLaren here and there as well, but for the most part, the high-speed stability issues do seem to be coming from those R8s, and I'm not entirely certain. I'm going to hazard a guess and say that these are the new R8s that have recently just been launched in the DLC. But again, like, the R8's always been a very twitchy car regardless, and it seems to be that those, those innate characteristics of the car, that is just something that has remained. I don't want to call them issues because, if you're aware of the car and you like the characteristics of it, then by all means, drivers will pick and stick with it. It's why people like the Porsche so much. The Porsche's, like, it is inherently and notoriously a difficult car to drive. There's nothing wrong with having a car that, is maybe a bit trickier to drive. I don't want to call it a problem per se. But it definitely seems to be a characteristic. We're seeing an awful lot today of those R8s.
Wolf Motorsport, by the way, in chat earlier, did take responsibility for the chat curse that did occur a little bit ago. It's okay, Wolf Motorsport. You get used to it in our line of work, so don't... eventually, you just become numb to it. I mean, I cursed Javier Marquez earlier. I said that, look, Javier, absolutely no fear into maggots this time, and immediately had an incident. So there you have it. It can happen at any given time. Folks, I have been trying to do the math, as you might expect, and if I'm honest, it's completely hopeless. The only race that I can really call for you so far is I think John Araser is going to end up leaving this race with the high silver championship lead by just a couple of points. Now, that's my early prediction, and that can all change as so many cars have a lot of pit stops left. Martin Lawrence is going to go ahead and get their last one out of the way. They'll pit at a 7th place, and a right move as they were right on the back of Hutchinson losing time. Never a better time to come down the pit lane whenever you're expecting to hemorrhage time. Ryan Yee this is the reason that I can't call it in the pro class, Josh, because you've got so many cars that are doing different things. Savalainen, who's third in the championship, they've still got 2 pit stops left. You've got Ryan Yee, who the race didn't start well for, but they're coming back through. They've still got a pit stop left to give, and you're wondering where they're going to come out. Martin Lawrence, who you just saw complete their last stop, surely they'll be quite a bit behind, but just how far behind? Samir Foch has that 15-second penalty. I don't even know where Christoph Stachecki is. Yes, they're in the 144, they're 14th place, and they have done all of their stops. Obviously, they're probably going to get by Yee at least, but how many points will Stachecki actually make up? Filippo Bokita might go on to win this race, and they might get max points, which, where will that put them? Top 3 maybe? I don't know. It's hopeless.
I was actually wanting to say about Bokita there, maybe taking those 2 stops early, maybe might be a detriment. They've clearly got the pace in the car, and the car seems to be behaving itself in race trim, as we mentioned at the start of the race. But now Bokita's stuck behind like all the other traffic. So it's obviously, again, the Porsche in traffic isn't the happiest car in the world, and maybe that's causing some problems. Maybe Bokita's being held up by the likes of Stefano and the cars up ahead, enough that maybe Watson can build enough of a gap to bang those 2 pit stops in. And again, 2 pit stops left at 13 minutes left remaining. I mean, what's the plan? Do we stop at the pits once and then go around the track once again and hit again directly on the next lap? And there's a handful of cars that haven't taken any stops yet. So there's a myriad of strategies going on with pros and cons, and we're not going to find out how it's going to work out up until the checkered flag in 13 minutes time. And it looks like Ryan Yee is chasing down Max Payne. Max Payne having a little bit of a wiggle going through Luffield there. And for Bokita, again, not that far up the track going into Cops Corner now. So this is anyone's race.
Keep in mind, there's no pit window here. There is no pit window, so you can pit pretty much whenever you like in this race. So there is no, you have to do it before the window closes. Normally that would disallow pitting on the last lap, but I think that is going to be something you could do here. But I think you nailed it, though. You will see cars pit and then pit immediately again. Pretty much what we saw at the beginning of the race, just in reverse from some of these cars. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Again, we won't know until the race is over, I'm afraid. It's been that sort of race. A couple of cars scattered through the field that still have a pit stop left to do. Ethan Scott, one of those. And, of course, Samir Foch has continued to make up time, but has that 15-second penalty that will be added on at the end. Bokita has made up a couple of spots and continues to race inside the top 10 without incident, making their way through the traffic. Benjamin Heilman, who was running dead last, 30th place earlier in the race, qualified decently, I would say, had issues on the opening lap, got their pit stops out of the way very early on, and has been fighting traffic ever since. But in 21st place for the moment, looking for a little bit more, trying to get by the Honda in front of him. Oh, Honda goes a little bit wide there. Heilman thinks about it. A little bit of quick handwork that time in Stowe, and gets right on the back of the 60. That's Sean Madison in that Honda. Going to try and go around the long way. Sean is going to yield, giving that spot to Mr. Heilman.
Yeah, Heilman making short work of it there. Now, there's 3 drivers I want to talk about right now, Jesse, if that's okay. Martin Lawrence. The guy, Ryan Yee making his final stop, so we will see where that brings them out at. But Martin Lawrence, currently right now, they'll be running top 10 once getting by Yee here. The guy had a tough early race, went to the back of the grid, and has pulled it back to a top 10. So that strategy has worked out very well for him. Heilman, on the other, I don't want to say on the other hand, but struggling in traffic, again, had a few incidents and struggling for pace, not necessarily for pace. Was that contact we just saw between the 2 McLarens? It might have been, pushing the other McLaren wide a bit. We will see a replay.
Let's take a look
Let me
here.
get back to my thought
He's
there. Here in
nowhere
just a
near
second.
him here. This is Ayrton Stefano. Oh, a little bit of a wiggle into Stowe. That's what got them close in the first place. But let's see, was there contact?
Last of the late breakers, potentially going up the inside. There's a look. Oh yeah, definitely a difference in braking, but it makes the move stick. That's fine so far. And yeah.
Oh, the crossover move!
Oh.
The crossover move by Ayrton Stefano. And I don't know if they touched. I don't care if they touched. That was a heck of a move.
That was in the moment. You know, those kind of moves. You know, he was so far behind. I don't think there wasn't enough time to really plan that. But you know, absolute props to Ayrton there. That was really well. Just you got to give credit for how well handled that was in that situation. Yeah, that's great stuff. But going back to Hellman, you know, struggling at the back there a bit in that Porsche, not necessarily struggling with pace, but struggling with traffic. And that brings me back to, funnily enough, Ryan doing me a favour there and going to Bokita. Bokita again in the Porsche got the stops early and out the way. Obviously, we've seen that going back for the back of the grid to the top 10 with Lawrence is entirely possible. Hellman doing something similar, but still struggling at the back. But given that car choice, is Bokita going to struggle in the same way as Hellman in that car with this traffic? There's only 8 minutes remaining, and yes, the cars in front still have to pit, but there is still a very real chance that all of that work Bokita has put into getting into this position might be undone just because of the car choice and its characteristics in traffic.
Yeah, and Bokita's got to be careful racing in amongst cars that have pit stops they have to make. Bokita can't let off the gas, so to speak. They've got to continue to work the gap. And when you're in traffic, when you're in cars, you're not actually racing. It's always a coin flip on, are they going to play nicely and let me through, or are they going to hold me up for their benefit? You just can't ever really tell. And one of the more frustrating things about doing the late pit stop or dealing with cars that are staying out as late as possible is this. Bokita is unfortunately the first of the cars to get to that group, as Martin Lawrence, like you said, has done a whale of a job. The Czech driver just refuses to give up and hasn't done in this situation. This is exactly what I was talking about with the points in the pro class. I can't tell how it's going to turn out. But what I do know is Martin Lawrence has worked this into an absolute treat for themselves. Christoph Stachecki looking down to the inside of Rafael Huel. This is not a pass for position in class, just merely for overall. But it was a pass Christoph Stachecki had to make and does quite nicely.
Yeah, it was really cleanly got by. Is that another small wiggle there from yet another Audi going through Stowe? Onto the back of Hellman. Obviously, we saw Hellman make up that position. I believe it was on Daly, making up another position on Phil Malta. Again, not for class position, but for overall, which puts Stewie a little bit ahead of catching up with the car ahead. That's a Razor going into the pits, and I believe that is their final stop of the race. Yes, final mandatory stop, leading Silver class at the moment. And here's Rafael Huel, second in Silver class, still yet to make that stop. So Razor getting it out of the way early, and hopefully the undercut will bring them out ahead of, or they'll be hoping that the undercut will bring them out ahead of the 721 Aston.
Well, folks, what you're about to see is almost unprecedented here on the RCI TV channel. 6 minutes left to go, and at least a couple of cars, the top three at least, have 2 pit stops left to do. And what you are about to see is some very quick pitting indeed. Watson pits out of P2. They'll have to do it once more in the next couple of laps. Samir Foch continuing to work back their way into the top 10. Working Flamger here a little bit over the curb. Nearly contact, but gets away with it there. Foch realizes they were in danger and allows the Flamger car to go back through for the time being. Here comes Jordan Watson out of pit lane, and as we watch this in a race with so many stop and go 30s issued for speeding in the pit lane, I almost hold my breath a little bit. This is the current leader of the race, Jonas Savalainen, this car has to give 2 pit stops in the next 3 laps to make it an official race. Otherwise, I think you get a ridiculous penalty if you do not. And almost on cue, Vanko Dimitrov has sped in the pit lane, stopped go 30 for one of our drivers inside the top 5.
It does seem that that marker being hit, it seems to be catching a fair few people out. I mean, Harry Conway, I honestly see that was heartbreaking because it's great to see him. It's great to see him out here, but catching Conway is far from inexperienced. Being caught up by that particular issue that's caught 4 or 5 drivers out today as well. It's quite sad to see and quite surprising as well. I must say, but when you're kind of pushing that gap as far as you can, it's these things can happen. Samir Foch in the AAA Lexus, right on the gearbox of the McLaren in front, but the AMG up ahead, and this will be the 100 Mercedes coming in, that's in the lead, coming in for the first of their 2 stops, hoping to really just try and pull out ahead of Bakita at this point. I think any of the cars in the top 3 at this point will be trying to come out ahead of that 326.
Savalainen will pit here and will likely pit on the very next lap as well. How many cars will come through? Where will Savalainen come out to begin with? Time will only tell. Everybody still with one more stop left to go inside the top 3. Dimitrov has a stop and go 30 and a pit stop, a normal stop to give. Billen has a stop to give. Rafael Huel in 10th place, current leader in the silver class, has one more stop. Are they far enough in front of John O'Racer, who just finished up their final stop? Clean stop for the 699, no penalty there. Huel, it's going to be close between them and O'Racer, I think, whenever they come through. The black and white 721. I love that. They've named the car what it actually is. It is a black and white car, and a very nice graphic on that all the same for Rafael Huel, but we'll have to make one more stop. I would say now's the best time to do that, in my humble opinion, because they've got Samir Foch and Timothy Flamger beating the little taillights off of that Aston, but they do not come through and pit on this occasion. They'll continue to frustrate Samir Foch here a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a really difficult situation for Rafael now. I mean, you never know what the cars that you're racing are going to be doing in terms of strategy. And to find yourself with several cars between you and the other car that you're racing, as much as frustrating as it is for the Pro Class cars, you know that the people around you that you're racing, they've done their stops. You're so far ahead, and you feel like you have to pick that moment. And in reality, you kind of do. Looking at things, speaking of finding stops and strategies, Savalainen only realistically, it doesn't seem like they're too far ahead of Bakita. Only Stefano separating, still with a stop to go. The battle for the lead could go either way. We'll have to wait and see in the next 2 minutes or so how it pans out. Ryan Yee, again, 13th place, coming back from the back of the grid. And this is Savalainen coming in for their final stop. This is where we're going to find out, are they going to come out ahead of the 326 Porsche? Has the Porsche been held up enough in terms of traffic? I don't think they have. It's Bakita coming out of Luffield. So Bakita, it seems, will take the lead of this race in the final minute and a half, the closing stages here at Silverstone.
Well, there's Savalainen and there's Bakita flashing by into turn number 1. Retakes the lead of the race. The RAG Esports team back in the lead with Felipe Bakita. This is the race I was more paying attention to myself. How well has Savalainen timed this? Will this be a podium still for the 100 AMG? The Getting Slower Everyday team, the worst name for a team, because that is absolutely not the case. Very self-deprecating from Savalainen, but they've done this. They've worked this strategy, and it's been absolutely magic. They've come out in P2. I had them as coming out in 3rd, but no, it's not the case. 2nd place for Savalainen. Ayrton Stefano cycles out into P3. The Argentinian driver might get their very first podium here at RCI.
we say that it looks like Martin Lawrence actually. Sorry for the slight pause there, just keeping an eye on things myself. Now it's Martin Lawrence slipping into P4, Watson slipping into P3. So it looks like that will potentially round out your top three, guys.
This championship is going to be very close. Ryan Yee had an incident earlier in the race that took them out of the conversation for a top 10, or excuse me, a top 5 today. They might still be in the conversation for a top 10. Martin Lawrence has rebounded in an astounding way. Savalainen used his late pit strategy to great effect. Those two are likely going to go to the top of the board today in the pro class, and it's going to be pretty much a dead heat between the two of them, Lawrence and Savalainen. The day, though, seemingly will belong to Filippo Bokita. They've been so close. They had a devastating finish to the race a week ago, but it will be Filippo Bokita winning here, round 3 of the Night Owl Season 10. Sean Madison's been spun. Sean Madison's been spun. The Frog Stomp Racing Honda has been involved in a major incident here as they're side by side behind them. How does this go wrong for the Frog Stomp Honda?
Seems to be like Howman behind us fighting a little bit with the Audi. The other Audi just turns them onto the grass, just full 360 spin. Luckily keeping out of the barriers, but will lose positions here. After time, not just final lap, but after time, which that's heartbreaking and not what you want on the final lap of the race at all.
Well, Mellis will come across the line to round out the top 10. Ryan Yee will be denied a top 10 finish here. John Aracer will convert his cool, calm, collected race today. The Swiss driver will win the race in high silver. Raphael Huell will get second place, well deserved. Ethan Scott will fight it out for third. They're very close. This is the battle we're watching. Ethan Scott in front of Rudy Philmalter. Philmalter digging off the corner, but will be denied by Ethan Scott, who will take third. A brilliant run of the day. Incredible stuff. Daly, what a rebound from them as well. They were running very nearly down the bottom as well. 21st place. Oh my goodness. A bunch of cars coming to the line here. The 88, of course, mentioned earlier that Ferrari had issues themselves. The results of the race confirmed Savalainen in second place and Ayrton Stefano in third place. What an incredible race that has shaken up the points in both classes. Eraser will likely be your high silver championship leader. I think Savalainen and Martin Lawrence, they're going to be really close in the battle for first place. I'm pretty sure Ryan Yee will either lose the lead in the Pro Championship or it'll be very, very close. The results confirmed. Scrolling past your screen here, a couple of retirements in the race, a lot of strategy. And honestly, Josh, we talked about it. What is the winning strategy here? There was a little bit of both. The pitting early worked and the pitting late worked. Just sort of depended on where you were.
Yeah, it definitely seems situational. It's I kind of thought it myself a little bit. Pitting at the optimal time, basically, it's not so much the situation that you kind of you plan for, but the situation that you find yourself in. And I think for me, if I had to say it, anyone's strategy working at all today, you got to give it to Martin Lawrence. Pulling it back from like the high 20s in the grid up to what was it, P4 at the end there. It just goes to show that again, as you say, Jesse, any strategy can work here depending on the situation that you find yourself in.
Well, it was that kind of race today. It was a toss-up between a lot of drivers, but nobody able to outdrive and outsmart Filippo Bokita. They are going to get the top honors today, and don't look past them in the championship. Bokita came in P6, but with maximum points today, that's the fastest lap, the pole position, and the win. They've put their name back into the hat, especially with some of the other cars having issues, Stachecki and Foch in particular. It was a fantastic day, and a day that Bokita needed after the disappointment that they suffered at the mountain, Mount Panorama, 1 week ago. Uh, what will race four look like? Probably completely different as we leave the British Isles for the second time this season. We'll be in Italy for round number four, Monza, in 1 week's time. My goodness, it's going to be a chaotic finish. I can already feel it.
I mean, Monza always an interesting one to come to, and I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds there at round four.
I've actually just remembered we will not be bringing you round four of the Night Owl Championship in 1 week. That's because the World Tour round number five from Barcelona, the 6 hours of Barcelona, will be here in our place in 1 week's time. We hope that you'll join us for that. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for all of that. And of course, we'll see you again on Monday for the continuation of the British Masters Championship. I'll be on the broadcast with you with John Dalton, and I believe Mr. Ryan Mawson will be back with us as well. The Thursday championship will start up on this Thursday. Touring cars and GT4 multi-class on Thursday. We'll bring you that live. And of course, the Friday champ will go on as scheduled this Friday. And of course, in 1 week's time, the 6 hours of Barcelona for the World Tour. Qualifying was a huge shakeup earlier in the day as well, and we'll see how the race shakes out for all of those teams. Josh, thank you for being with me coming in on a Saturday evening. It's lovely to have you back.
It's lovely to be back, and thank you for having me back. I mean, I get to sit here, sit in a booth with some of my favorite people, and commentate on a race that I love. So, for me, it's a win-win.
Well, it was always lovely to have you. Josh and I, of course, if you're a longtime viewer here at RCI, you'll notice that Josh and I used to work together quite frequently here on the channel. And it's just like it's like going home. It's like going to Nan's house almost a little bit. But a big thank you to everybody who made this broadcast possible, the admins, the broadcast team, and of course the stewards as well. And a big thank you to all of our partners that make this race and every race possible. Thank you to Race Department, racedepartment.com, your source of sim racing news and information, AK Informatica for providing our server solutions, Driver 61 and driver61.com. You can get 25% off your driver coaching by going to driver61.com and inputting our discount code. The link's in the description. Proof's in the pudding. We've had several of our admins use Driver 61's driver coaching, and it definitely has rendered fantastic results on the racetrack. Fanatec.com. Next time you make purchases of quality sim racing hardware from Fanatec.com, feel free to use our affiliate link in the description of the video. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it tells them that we sent you, and it may help us with things like server cost when you use it. And of course, simracing.gp. If you're tired of pub racing or just can't get enough racing and want to have it on the regular, join simracing.gp. Join a community and get racing today. Many communities have daily racing on the platform, and of course, it's free to sign up. What a race we had. I am going to spend the next 30 minutes of my life trying to make sense of the points. And in the meantime, Josh, final thoughts on the day.
I mean, we had a bit of everything. You know, we laughed, we cried. You know, we had some absolutely stunning drives. You know, in Lawrence and Bakita, we had some heartbreak in Heilman and Conway. We had everything here tonight, and I don't think you can ask for much more.
You certainly can't. There was a post race incident I want to mention. There was a drive through given for the 34 for an unsafe rejoin leading to a takeout, and that was post race. Everybody else is clear at the end. Folks, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, but like I said, in our place next week, the 6 hours of Barcelona. We hope that you'll join us. And of course, our next broadcast on the channel will be on Monday, the British Masters Championship that has been so electric thus far. We hope that you'll be with us. Until next time, we hope you have a good weekend. Have a good night.